I'm Walter Isaacson, and I'm happy to welcome you to this session, a session that actually has three great friends of the Aspen Institute. Cory has been a Henry Crown Fellow of the Institute, and Antonio and Gavin have been now made honorary members of the family, for which, thank you. It's good to see you. I have a few quick announcements. There'll be a session here at 4 this afternoon that I'm going to be a part of that'll be very good, I hope, in which Haley Barbour, the governor of Mississippi, will be interviewed by Chris Matthews. Haley is always a real hoot, but he was also a great partner to those of us in Louisiana after Katrina, and I really urge you to come to that one. That has been moved. It's now at 4, not 5 o'clock, and it will be right here where you're sitting. So if you feel very lazy, just stay in your seats for all day. That'll end at about 4:50, and then we'll wander over to the Green Wall where Bill Clinton will be speaking at 5:15, which will be about 25 minutes after Haley Barbour ends. Tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, there's a new session with the rapper Nas, which will be 9 a.m. at the Koch building. And then the other thing I really want to point out that I'll be involved with is 10:30 tomorrow, Wynton Marsalis, who I think is extraordinary, is going to do something that's not a speech and it's not a concert, but it's both. It's sort of the ballad of the American experience, and he's bringing some of his musicians from jazz at Lincoln Center. And I've worked with him on it. I've seen him do versions of this. But it's a march through American history interwoven with the jazz music that explains it, or the march music that explains it. So that's 10:30 tomorrow in the Greenwald Pavilion, Wynton Marsalis. For this panel, our moderator is Peter Trick. Hello, Peter. Peter's with Booz Allen Hamilton in the Energy, Transportation, and Environment practice. And he's one of the people that's doing the Reimagining America's Infrastructure. That's one of Booz Allen Hamilton's great projects. He's a policy analyst and a lawyer who's worked for more than 3 decades to do economic development, sustainability, and environmental protection here and abroad. And he's had great involvement with America's cities, so he cannot be anybody better to do this panel. Thanks, Peter, for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's a real honor to be here. I've had my mind stretched over the week and just had the most wonderful time. It's a particular honor to moderate such an esteemed panel with such political celebrities. I want to thank you all for being here.
We don't want to be political.
I know that, but it's undeniable. Wow. It is undeniable. I'm particularly gratified to see such a large audience, given that one of America's great athletes, Lance Armstrong, is at a neighboring venue right now. Please, none of you get up, having made that announcement. It surely is a credit to the extraordinary caliber of the folks that I have here with me today. Let me do a brief intro of each. I think you all know them, but these are pretty remarkable people. And then I'm going to set the stage. And then I've been warned that with 3 very articulate politicians, I probably am going to only be able to ask one question, and then we will be swept away. No. But so let me first start off by introducing Gavin Newsom. He's, as you know, the newly elected governor of California. Excuse me, Lieutenant Governor.
I wasn't going to correct you.
Right. Did you like that?
I didn't mind it.
Prior to that, he was the 2-term mayor of San Francisco, and if any of you were here earlier this week, Siemens announced San Francisco as the cleanest city in America, so congratulations. Greenest, yeah. He's had a range of political successes in fighting climate change, improving the San Francisco school system, bringing the America's Cup to San Francisco, and balancing the budget. Imagine that for 7 years. Gavin was recently selected as the most social mayor, according to Same Point, based on a social media profile of mayors. One of his most notable recent accomplishments is that he and his wife gave birth to your son. Congratulations, and thank you for being here. To my immediate right here is Cory Booker. He is not the mayor of New York. He's the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. Prior to that, he served 4 years on the Newark Municipal Council. He attended Stanford, was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and graduated Yale University at law school. He's made great progress in reducing New York's crime rate. He's renowned for his successes in bringing philanthropy to support city resources. He's improving the Newark school system, the parks, tremendous accomplishments. President Obama asked Cory to serve as on the White House Office of Urban Affairs Policy, and he declined, citing his commitment to the city of Newark. Oprah Winfrey has said of Cory, his enormous intelligence is only surpassed by his heart. Pretty high commendation. Cory told me that he actually wrote that line and gave it to and on in the center here is my dear friend Antonio Villaraigosa, who is the two-term mayor of Los Angeles, the second largest city in the United States. He served for 2 years on the Los Angeles City Council and 6 years in the California State Assembly, having a meteoric rise up to Speaker of the Assembly. He served as a campaign co-chair for Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign and served on President Obama's Transition Economic Advisory Board. Highlights of Antonio's service as mayor include crime reduction, school reform, comprehensive anti-gang strategy, launching Green LA, significant infrastructure improvements. Antonio was in the news recently as the recently elected president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He helped pass a resolution calling on Congress to redirect military spending to domestic priorities. Needless to say, got a fair amount of attention for that. So, as you can see, we're fortunate to have a tremendously talented set of municipal leaders. One of the observations that I've had being at Aspen this week is that we seem to struggle with tremendous challenges, and it seems to me the default that is going to bring about overcoming these challenges is leadership, persistence, compromise, and partnership. And I think these three gentlemen are going to be able to provide us tremendous insights into the vital elements that will move our country forward. Now let me quickly frame this conversation so you can hear them. President Obama cited rebuilding America's infrastructure as key to winning the future. And the magnitude of this challenge when you think about infrastructure is truly gargantuan. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that we're looking at about a $2.2 trillion deficit in capital investment of infrastructure. This includes things like wastewater and energy and transportation. Cities are on the front line of needing to make these investments. When you consider, I was looking at the recent census data, over 80% of the population of the U.S. resides in our cities, and that urbanization is increasing faster than our overall population growth. So cities are where our people are. Yet much of the urban infrastructure is old, it's obsolescent. The sewage treatment plants in this country were built in the 1960s, 1970s, roads, bridges, so they face a tremendous challenge. At the same time, there is extraordinary opportunity for our cities in terms of the innovation and technology of a smarter infrastructure. And these connected vehicles, intelligent transportation, distributed energy systems can afford us the real opportunity to bring energy efficiency, clean environment, and particularly stimulating economic development. So this could all lead to a happier, healthy, and more prosperous citizenry. Cities, and then particularly the gentlemen and the cities that they're representing today, are really stepping to the fore. It was interesting, I had a conversation with Gavin 2 days ago in which he talked to me about, is the world in fact arriving at the return of the city-state, you know, like the ancient Roman cities or the Hanseatic League. They really are the economic engines of our future. And interestingly, they're showing real leadership in climate change. And they're the demonstration sites of the transformation of our nation. So this session is going to explore the challenges and opportunities associated with that transformation, particularly focusing on the political, financial, and social challenges that we're facing. So with that, hopefully brief intro, let me turn to each of you, and I'm going to ask you first a kind of a simple question. I talked with Gavin. You know, Gavin is now obviously Lieutenant Governor, but he's going to speak from the voice of his successful reign in San Francisco. What do you see as the greatest single challenge that each of you faced in preparing your city for the 21st century, and what opportunities excite you the most? Do you want to start, Gavin?
Well, first of all, thank you. And we're all going on a hike with Lance afterwards, so eat your heart out, Lance, that everyone showed up. He was kind of bragging last night. There would be a small audience here. So we're very grateful for your presence. It's true, Peter. Now I represent technically 476 cities in the state of California. But I will speak from the perspective that I left just 5.5, almost 6 months ago, as mayor of a city that was probably best described as 47.5 square miles surrounded by reality. Think about that. But it's always been a city of dreamers and doers, of entrepreneurs, a city that has prided itself on being on the leading and cutting edge of new ideas, but it suffers from the same challenges that cities across not only America, but across the globe are challenged with. And clearly the biggest backdrop of our challenges is economic. And that is self-evident and predicate to this discussion in infrastructure and aging population, more needs, more desire, more expectation from government, but less resources to actually deliver on those promises. So fundamentally, that's the one thing I think that will transcend our conversation today in terms of the commonality. But at the end of the day, this is the most extraordinary moment in history when it comes to urban centers. In 2005, for the first time in human history, more people on the planet were living in urban areas than suburban and rural areas. We reached that 50% threshold. And what's extraordinary is what's happening as we speak. About 180,000 people every single day around the globe descending upon urban areas. You've got 700 million people in the next 10 years that will be urbanized. We'll be at 70% by 2050. Already, we are consuming 75% of the Earth's natural resources. So when you think of issues like climate change, at the end of the day, what is consumption except the sum total of all local consumption? It will be mayors, city administrators, city council members, members of county boards of supervisors that will determine the fate and the future of this planet from that sustainable perspective. And to me, that is the backdrop of some of the greatest challenges, and that's resource distribution, resource allocation. How do you accommodate this mass urbanization? How do we address the needs of these urban centers and all the extraordinary diversity that is afforded us? How do we celebrate all that diversity, but at the end of the day, as Dr. King said, unite around our common humanity, the things that bind us together. And so those are the challenges, but also the extraordinary opportunities, because within those cities is the creativity. Within those cities is that cultural diversity that drives innovation and new ideas. And I just think it's an extraordinary time in our country and our planet as it relates to the topic of urban centers. And so I look forward to how this conversation goes and sharing some perspectives.
Thank you, Gavin. Antonio?
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you all of you for having me here today. And it's great to be here with two of the people that I believe are two of America's greatest public servants, and particularly greatest mayors. Let me set a predicate on this idea of city-states. If you took 3 metropolitan areas, New York, LA, and Chicago, the top 3 economies in the United States, our GDP, or our economic output, is roughly the equivalent to France, the 5th largest economy in the world. If you took the 10 largest metropolitan economies, that's a $5 trillion economy approaching the $5.9 trillion economy of China. When you invest in cities, 84% of the people in this country live in cities. 90% of the economic output of the nation is in our metropolitan areas. And next year, 94% of the new jobs that are going to be created in those cities. So when we go to Washington and say to the Congress, stop dithering, you need to be making investments, that $2.2 trillion need is over a 5-year period of time for infrastructure. When you look at America's bridges today, when you look at America's highways, when you look at our public transportation system, it's falling apart. And that is the economic, the economic base, the predicate, if you will, to be able to move goods and people. So on this idea of city-states, Gavin hit it right on the head. This is the future of America, and it's actually the future of the world. When we've had opportunities to go to Copenhagen as an example, you saw at Copenhagen as all of the heads of state were hitting each other to see who could do the least on climate change. We were doing the same thing, except we were trying to outdo one another to say who's the greenest city, who's doing the most. And so where the energy is right now in America is in America's cities. And as far as challenges for America's cities, there is no greater challenge today for all of us than the challenge of putting people to work. We're all thinking every day, 24/7, how do we get people to work? And there's a great opportunity to do that when you look at infrastructure investment in America and transportation and improving our ports, our airports, our highways, our public transportation system. Very little investment on the part of the federal government right now because of all of the focus on deficits and debt. And that's a conversation that I'll want to talk to as I turn it over to my friend, Cory Booker.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to be on a panel with these two gentlemen with so much hair. And we were talking earlier before we came that we could solve America's budget problems if we just taxed hair products.
Well, you got one on your side.
There you go.
You're not alone.
We are very aerodynamic.
Yes, we move much more swiftly during the day, far less resistance. In all seriousness, the two gentlemen to your right are really extraordinary leaders. I, as mayor coming up and mayor-to-be, when I was looking at sort of heroes on the issues that were very important to me, it was these two mayors that came to the fore. Gavin, when I was looking, you named the issue, from social media, which was already mentioned, to issues like homelessness and housing. He was a model that we looked to, and an extraordinary leader that I'm grateful for. And Antonio is the same way. He is, I don't think it has been said yet, he's the mayor of all the mayors in America. He is the leader of our mayoral coalition and really the spokesperson for that. But I still look to him for models for success. In 2009, when Newark became the second best city in America for reducing gun violence, the #1 city in America was Los Angeles, and he continues to set the pace for the country with the innovations he's bringing to the fore. So it's an honor and a privilege to be with two friends, and I'm sure I'll be watching them from behind as Lance leads us up the mountain. Go on without me, I've got your back. Look, so to me, I think it's already been said, #1, I cannot tell you enough that the innovation in the United States of America is most coming from the local forum. And it is mayors in many ways who shun the partisanship that I think is killing our country and don't look left or right. They just have to every single day answer the urgent challenges and immediate challenges of our populations. And that's why I think so much good is happening, where you really are having people on the ground mixing with different sectors. The challenge for me in Newark is the same challenge in Los Angeles, same challenge in San Francisco, Detroit, Cincinnati. We face a number of challenges. But the great thing is, as was said by another leader speaking later on today, is everything wrong with America can be solved by everything right with America. Everything wrong with cities, in my opinion, can be solved by everything right with cities. And as I face a city that is in the #1 metropolitan region in the country, as I have a city that is the largest in its state, the #1 college town, and the 9th or 10th largest state in the nation, that has a long history of a solid infrastructure, though decaying in its city. I can go on and on about the advantages, but the reality is you juxtapose that with one of the highest poverty rates in the state of New Jersey, one of the lowest educational performance rates, health disparity outcomes that are savage and chilling, from epidemic asthma rates amongst our children to obesity rates amongst kids that are upwards of 50% for children, for minority children. And so when I look at infrastructure, and my team really thinks about this, we really don't think about how we can make our cities successful. What we're really looking at is how can we raise the quality of life to reflect our highest democratic ideals and aspirations. And I have seen cities that have gone through the worst of gentrification, that have further stratified their cities, that have further segregated their cities, and further driven people into the underclass. And so this will really be the test of Newark and other cities, because the pendulum for our city is moving back, because people are really understanding the logic of the cities, the fierce rationality of being there. For example, we just moved the North American headquarters of Panasonic to Newark, New Jersey. It's the first major new building to come, the first skyscraper we're going to build in our downtown since before I was, pretty much since before I was born. 1,000 jobs for our city. It's extraordinary. And if you talk to the CEO, why did you come? He says, look, we want to be a company that speaks in a competitive way. We want to be one of the greenest companies in the North America. And we think by being in Newark, New Jersey, right on a major transportation hub, that we can lower our carbon footprint, we can increase our efficiency, and we can have a major presence. So my hope, in conclusion of some opening remarks, is that we begin to think intelligently about how sustainability, how greening society, how investing in infrastructure, as Antonio so eloquently says often, is what actually helps to create a society that is more equal, a society that does not leave people out, a society that builds an economy that serves not just some Americans, but really serves all of Americans.
And if I may interject, both of them use the word competition, and I think it's, for me, very enlivening. It is a very fundamental point that needs to be reinforced. What's happening between cities and mayors? There is a wonderful competitive edge that's happening. And that's great. I mean, we're competing for Panasonic. I'm competing against Antonio for companies in Northern Part, et cetera. And we're competing against 25 metro regions around the world. Right. And we're not asking for permission. As Antonio said, we didn't ask for permission on climate change. I mean, remember, it was Democrats, not just Republicans, that pulled away from Kyoto, 98-0. Clinton loves to say, before he came back, it was the first bill that was rejected before it was introduced. No one believed you can grow your economy and reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. But it was cities that stepped up and stepped in. Mayor Nichols notably led the charge with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and got all of us to sign off on local global climate action plans. Ours in San Francisco called to go twice as far as the Kyoto protocols. We actually reached Kyoto in 2008 in San Francisco. We had already reduced our greenhouse gas emissions 7% below 1990 levels. We achieved that in 2008. In 2012, our goal next year is to reduce them 20% as we grow our economy. And it was a lot of ideas that we poached from other cities. Exactly. You may have read Mayor Bloomberg announced that he was going to green his taxi fleet in New York. He announced it on the Today Show. What you didn't know was 2 years prior, a mayor out on the West Coast in San Francisco announced on local cable channel 26 his plan to reduce the number of traditional taxi cabs. By the way, we're at 80%. Mr. Bloomberg, I know he's still struggling, but that was the kind of competition. So we're always casing each other's joints. There is a business model here. Not to be more businesslike, but there's a competitive model that is rising the bar. And it is a very supportive model. And I do think that is what I think most excites me about local government. And frankly, now having moved to the state, is my struggle and frustration with state government. States are laboratories of democracy, of course, but cities are laboratories of innovation.
So I would love for you to compare your climate change results with San Francisco.
Well, I was whispering.
Yeah,
and Gavin is so right. I mean, we have this among the mayors, and not just the mayors of the United States, around the world. Yeah. You know, I talked to mayors from Mexico City to Paris to Shanghai, and I can tell you we're all trying to outdo one another. And that's important because, you know, we're number 7. But 6 years ago when I started, we were in the 30s.
Right.
And for us to move this fast, and we always say, joking with San Francisco, we're going to be the largest clean, green, big city in the United States of America. Because, of course, we're 5 times larger than San Francisco.
All right. Thanks for reminding everybody. We're still on the same size budget. That's another issue.
Yeah, right. That's right. But that doesn't include our airport, our port, and the largest public utility in the United States.
I was
America.
warned I could never control you guys, and I'm
example.
beginning to see it.
But
right.
to speak to that, let me give you an example. And again, he's right. I mean, we've looked to San Francisco. They have been they've been doing this for 20 years, but particularly under Gavin, and accelerated it. But we're the first public utility in California to hit the 20% clean alternative fuel goal. Every single bus in the county, every single one is a clean fuel bus. It's the largest clean fuel fleet in the world. Our Clean Air Action Plan at the port, which I started, is the most far-reaching effort to clean up a port in the world. And as they can tell you, port activity is one of the dirtiest activities there are, and it really is a big contributor to our smog and our air quality. We use the same amount of water that we did 30 years ago, and the population is 1.5 million more than it was back then. And since I've been mayor, we've cut it by a third. So on all of those issues, our green building standard, they have the toughest one in the country. I like to say we have the toughest one of a big city in the country. But we got it from him. I mean, let's be honest. We got it from San Francisco. And you're seeing this around the country. We're sharing best practices. We're looking at what one another are doing. The green taxi thing, you started. New York did it. We're doing it now as well. These are the kinds of, among mayors, there is a willingness to share best practices, to work with one another, and a real drive to kind of lead the way.
Do you want to talk about your parks and your brownfields at work, or?
I want to compete with these guys. The old saying that good mayors borrow, great mayors steal. And the reality is, and again, I just cannot make this point enough, because I think we're speaking in a country right now that has not shown its the ability to deal with complicated problems on a national level or even on a statewide level. That I love the fact that we have a group of mayors around this country. It's co-opetition. We cooperate with each other. We share ideas. Ideas cannot exist in a vacuum anymore. Every area that we've worked on in the city of Newark, I've gone out to other mayors first and to try to find the best practices and try to build on them in the city of Newark. And I pick Mayor Bloomberg's pocket all the time because he could afford it to find out what's happening. But again, I want to keep coming back to what's got to be the measure of how a city is doing. And you've got to measure how great your city is based upon your most vulnerable populations. And so when I'm looking at ideas and stealing ideas about sustainable housing from New Orleans and talking to a lot of the people from Brad Pitt to others and literally copying the projects in the city of Newark, what it means is creating new models of sustainable housing that are supportive housing, that is housing that's working for people that are often left on the margins, that are housing that are not contributing to the asthma rates of my residents, but have LEED standards, solar panels, but also, which is great, what's happening in the city of Newark, and again, copied from other mayors, I proudly say, is unlike California, the #1 solar producer in the United States is New Jersey.
They are.
But we learn from other people that when we do our local housing projects now, sustainable housing, we also are involving our own local residents in job training and solar panel installations to try to find the multiplier effects that are not going to just create great cities with shiny new buildings, but create transformed populations that have new gateways into a 21st century economy.
Peter, I'd like to build on something that Cory mentioned, and I think all three of us agree. Part of the success of cities and city leaders, and part of why we are the innovation centers of the nation, is we're not nearly as partisan as the folks in the Beltway. Here's an example. I said that the #1 challenge for cities right now is to put people back to work. This is at a time when all of us have faced our worst financial crisis since the 1930s. Out of a general fund, I have a much bigger budget, I said, with the Department of Water and Power and airport and port, and special funds, but just the general fund, civilian, not police. There were 14,900 employees. I had to cut 4,600 jobs out of that 14,000. $1.9 billion out of the general fund budget in the last 3 years. I've had to do it, and somebody mentioned over there, hey, Mayor, you're going to fill some more potholes this year? And I said, yes. Last year was tough. We cut so many people. And so we've had to make a lot of decisions like pension reform. I got our employees to go from 7% contribution to 11% for current employees. New employees will be going to 11% as well. Across the country, at a time when the federal government, the Democrats, won't touch the issue of entitlements, Social Security, and Medicare, which we know is broken and is a big driver for the deficits and the debt, we're all supporting pension reform. We're all making the tough decisions. And I think that's one of the big differences between cities and what you see is happening in the Beltway. They're so ideological, they're very partisan, they're unwilling to trade ideas, to adopt the ideas of the other side that might, actually have some worth. And we're a lot different from that.
And let me reinforce that. I mean, it's the old adage, no one cares who's to blame. They want to know what the heck you're going to do. And no one cares as a mayor if you're fixing a pothole, if you were a Democrat or Republican. They want that stuff done. And so there is a pragmatism, a hard-headed pragmatism. And what's wonderful about being a mayor is good ideas, bad ideas, you get feedback immediately. It's real time. It's not an
They
intellectual.
knock on your door.
They knock on your door. Right. But let me be provocative on the issue of money. We've all suffered, the challenges. I think I'll be provocative. In many respects, a wonderful thing. I've come to the conclusion money is not our problem. It's a lack of new ideas. When we did universal health care 4 years ago in San Francisco, and we're the only, I think, big city or whatever size city I am, that has universal health care, we did it. We didn't have any money, but we came up with a better idea. And we realized something that I've understood as a private sector guy. I've got about 1,000 employees in the state of California, is you got to have a better idea, and then you can find the resources. Money's out there. Money is out there. When we did our healthcare plan, the money was out there, and it was caught up in these grant programs in the feds. But we didn't even know, because we weren't asking the right questions. We didn't have a framework of a plan to seek those dollars. We're an extraordinarily wealthy state, extraordinarily wealthy country. Trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines, the hedge funds and sitting in the banks. You all know that. I mean, this stuff we've been talking about all week here in Aspen. So it's really about ideas. Best politics is a better idea. And if we can compete on ideas, and that's what you're hearing in terms of the competitive frame, we can solve a lot of problems as long as we have the entrepreneurial tools to take risks. And that's, again, the final point I want to make. What I love about mayors, Peter, is we're not risk adverse.
Right.
Well, politicians are in broad strokes, and that's why you don't see the kind of innovation at the state and federal level that you do at the local level.
Let me pull that money thread back. So the infrastructure challenge that we have is hugely costly. Mayors have been doing innovative things. Your use of philanthropy. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
No.
Got a little bit of attention on that, did you?
No, look, I just want to pick up on a point and try to somehow steer it back to answering your question, which may not be successful. Look, we are in a state in our country where, the first rule of holes is when you're in one, stop digging. But we haven't learned that yet. And when it comes to entitlements, what we see on the ground in our cities, when we're struggling, my entire police budget, 99.5% of my police budget is spent on personnel costs. So and those of you in the private sector know this. Your fringe, your salary, the private sector maybe 20% to cover pension, healthcare costs, prescription. Newark is at 68% for police officers. Camden, New Jersey, 84% to cover all the costs of carrying employees. So this is a serious problem. Healthcare costs in this nation are outrageous compared to what our competitor nations are spending for often better results. These are problems that we have not had the collective courage to deal with in a substantive way. And then our politics further perverses that. And what we see on the local level is people through protecting political patronage, protecting investments in corn, crop subsidies, investments in military spending that even the generals themselves say they don't need. But meanwhile, what we know will build strong economies, what will create jobs today, what will help to create engines of economic opportunity, that we're not investing wisely in our cities, in the areas that have created the great wealth and abundance that America has made. And this is what is frustrating, anguishing to me, to see that we know the solutions. And this is, as mayor, and I say this to my team all the time, is we don't need to be the smartest city on the block. We just need to be the quickest adapters. Because you name an issue out there, I tell my team all the time, there is somebody doing it that all we got to do is copy it and make it better. We have an ex-offender reentry program that's gotten a lot of national attention. Our overall program, 10% recidivism rate. Our best program, our fatherhood program, has a 3% recidivism rate. Wow. So don't tell me that we who spend exorbitant amounts of money, talk about capital and investment, we're wasting our nation's strongest, best natural resource every single day in our schools, in our prisons. Wasting. It's a carnage of human potential, and the best thing to source a global knowledge-based economy is actually your people. So I know there's ways to solve these problems. We don't, it's not a problem that we don't know how to deal with this stuff. It's that do we have the collective will, courage, political will to actually own up and solve these problems. And so when you have a democracy that it fundamentally is not serving the interests, the common interests of its community, of its people, then we have a crisis of monumental proportions in our nation. So we've tried to in Newark, and this is going to be the artful twist to try to actually answer your question. So watch this jujitsu move, please. You know, we've in Newark said that if we as government just try to solve our problems and try to rely on our state legislature and just try to rely on the federal government to solve our problems and wait for the next big block grant or somehow for Congress, we're never going to solve our problems. And we've always said that we've got to find a way to partner with other sectors to do the things that other people aren't doing to get the results that other people aren't getting. And this is what I said, and a phenomenal group of people in San Francisco that I've had a chance to get to know and get to work with, or in the Bay Area rather. And I was just at a conference at Stanford and that did a partnership with Goldman Sachs, and we were talking about the education problem. And I was asked to speak, and it was one of those speeches where I got just found myself getting very angry because I was sitting in a room of amazing human beings like this. Who are doing it already, who are showing islands of excellence, but we as a community have failed to make hemispheres of hope. And I was, you know, in my city, we've got Malcolm X Shabazz High School. In your city, you've got Thurgood Marshall. In LA, which I'm very familiar with, my mother grew up in, you can name your luminary leader in the Black and Latino community. You've got schools named after them. But yet we can identify these schools. 2 years ago, Thurgood Marshall, Dropout Factory. 2 years ago, Malcolm X Shabazz, Dropout Factory. Thurgood Marshall, I know the statistics because Lorraine Jobs was telling them to me. 600 plus students entered Thurgood Marshall. Only 10 black and brown kids graduated. 10 college ready. 10. And that is in arguably next to the Newark metropolitan region. The San Francisco metropolitan region is one of the greatest in the globe. How can we have a nation of such great wealth where you basically took 590 individuals and chained them to mediocrity? A black male who does not graduate from high school has more of a chance of going to prison than having a full-time job. And think about the cost to society of that. I see it every single day. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars they're draining from the common treasury just to deal with those issues. And we have not, as a country, stepped up to do what was necessary to educate those children. So my frustration in Newark was, how can we find ways to break through this? And really it has been finding Americans who recognize that we drink, all of us are not here by our own making. We all drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty that we did not dig. We eat lavishly from banquet tables prepared for us by our ancestors. We have an obligation to make sacrifices above what we do in just paying taxes and just living our lives and taking care of our family. And we found a lot of venture philanthropists, a lot of courageous people that said, I'm an American, I have to answer a calling to break us out of this maddening cycle that is just churning human potential and undermining the greatest country on the globe. And we found philanthropists that have been willing to do the ex-offender reentry programs I'm talking about were funded by partnerships, left-right partnerships. The Manhattan Institute, a right-leaning think tank, is one of my leading partners for reentry programs in the city of Newark. For school reform, I found powerful partnerships with people on the right for engaging in models of education reform in the city of Newark, for just greening our infrastructure. We were considered, when I became mayor, one of the most underparked cities in America, usable green space. We took pictures of what people called city parks. The staffer I sent out to do it came back with tears in her eyes, saying, I cannot believe visiting neighborhoods that kids have no place to play. And we said, we're going to bring together a powerful coalition, the Trust for Public Land, private philanthropists, neighborhood community groups, and transform the topography of Newark. And we now have had the largest parks expansion, not because of government action, but because of the courage of the average American citizen to say, I'm going to show that we can create global change right here in my neighborhood by partnering with government leaders, partnering with nonprofits, partnering with clergy and others to make transformative change.
But Cory, where I'll disagree with Cory is I think it was by government action because he was open to new ideas.
Right.
And he created a different energy. And I think you made slightly my point. The money's out there. If we have the courage to try to change the way we do business in a way that could be a conduit, government as a platform, not the delivery system of every service necessarily, but as a platform for that delivery. I see a member of the Fisher family here. They stepped up and stepped in. They said, if you match dollars on a Fields campaign, we'll go out and do 2 to 1. I mean, if you commit X, we'll do Y plus Z. And we went out and they've revitalized, I don't know, we're up to 15 brand new play fields, just one family was willing to commit to. And how many others are out there?
But the problem with that is now Antonio and I will be both going to John Fisher over
I
there.
know, don't do that. But in Antonio, you've had it as well. You've had remarkable success finding philanthropy, particularly in education reforms as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I didn't want to, tomorrow we're going to talk about education, but I think it's the most important economic issue of our time, the most important democracy issue of our time, and because of the achievement gap that Cory talked about, it's also the most important civil rights issue of our time. And I tell people that we don't have the National Guard blocking the schoolhouse door any longer, but the lack of success in urban schools is as insidious as it was before Brown versus education. And we're going to talk about that, and that's tomorrow. But that is critical to getting people back to work. When you look at our unemployment rate right now, the biggest part of that unemployment rate are undereducated workers. It's not the college graduates or folks who have an advanced degree or even folks who have some college. It's the high school dropouts and the high school graduates disproportionately who are out of work right now. So that's one of the challenges to putting people back to work, which was what you asked us originally. What is the biggest challenge? And on that note, let me mention something that we started in LA. In the middle of a recession, we got bipartisan support, Democrat and Republican leaders. We put on the ballot a half-penny sales tax. The business community, labor, environmentalists, public health community, half-penny sales tax to generate $40 billion over a 30-year period of time, to double the size of our rail system, to invest in highway and bridge repair. And early on, people would ask me, well, Mayor, where's that subway to the sea? And I said, well, ma'am, this was a half-penny sales tax, not a 10-cent sales tax. We're going to build this stuff over a 30-year period of time, not in 3 years. And that gave us the idea that, hey, what could we do to accelerate that 30-year funding into a 10-year period of time? And we came up with a 30-10 plan, a plan to accelerate funding for public transportation. We would double the size of our rail system in LA, create 166,000 jobs, and importantly, address the need to put people back to work. We started looking at innovative financing tools. And this is, again, the Congress has a loan program called the TIFIA program, but it's completely underfunded. $122 million for all of the transportation. Well, you know what a joke that is. And so we said, why don't we triple it? In fact, why don't we take it to $1 billion? Now, you might say, in a period of deficits and debt, how can you do that? Well, we have a $2.2 trillion need over the next 5 years. There's a 30-to-1 leverage. So, because we pay back the loans, a 30-to-1 leverage for this. So we now have bipartisan support. I was in a press conference 7 weeks ago with Barbara Boxer and John Mica, a Democrat and Republican, who don't agree on much. Tom Donahue, the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Richard Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, who are always in battle. Me and a Republican mayor arguing for expanding a loan program, for investing in a bond program that will create the public-private partnerships and allow us to invest now at a time of high deficits and debt. And so you see, there really are innovative and creative ways, even in this time of high deficit and debt, to address infrastructure investment.
And you know, this is the way we don't talk to each other, because this whole issue, and I think you, again, your courageous voice when mayors just met in Baltimore, talking about the war overseas, I think it was one of the most courageous things the U.S. Conference of Mayors has done by having such a strong statement on the war, and maybe you'll talk about that in a moment. But just the whole conversation of taxes in our country has become so binary. Look, I don't want to pay more taxes to see in the state of New Jersey where firefighters and police can aggregate their sick days over the time that they've been in office and walk out, I'm not exaggerating, with paychecks that private sector would never get, but payouts for their health, for their sick time of upwards of $250,000. This is standard practice in the state of New Jersey. So I don't want to tax my residents, my working poor families struggling to pay their mortgages, more to do that. But let me tell you something. New Jersey has the third, I think it's third, forgive me if I'm wrong, but we're in the bottom of gas taxes in the United States of America. And the majority of that tax, by the way, for me in New Jersey, is not the majority, but upwards of 50% of that tax is paid for people that come through the New Jersey Turnpike, through the Parkway. Why are we having a conversation? I spoke with somebody on the transition team of our governor, who was a Republican, who said to me, it seemed clear to me, let's raise a penny more on our gas tax and repair our roads. And they said, absolutely not. We're a no-tax environment. No way it was taken off the table. So we need to start having a much more nuanced tax. And to sustainability, let me give you an example of this. I am not a big believer in tax cuts for the wealthy. I've never seen, it is offensive to me, that the first time in our country's history that we are in two major wars where disproportionately kids from my city are dying over there in Iraq and Afghanistan. And most of us the war is not even in our consciousness in this country. But yet we were told we could have our big expensive wars and for the first time ever get our tax cuts as well. To me, that's astonishing to me that Americans are not called to sacrifice anymore when our men or women are giving our blood and treasure. But I am in favor of massive tax breaks that make sense, that serve our common interest. So we did, and our Republican governor, and this is where my governor and I, where we agree, we go full bore, worked with us to pass a urban transit hub tax credit that said it's sustainable development for us to encourage businesses to build and locate around large urban transit hubs. So let's give corporate tax breaks because it's ultimately going to create business. Panasonic and a number of other companies have taken advantage of this tax break to locate their businesses, not in sprawl, urban sprawl like we have, suburban sprawl in the state of New Jersey, but move it back to our transit hubs. That's smart tax breaks. So we need to start having a far more nuanced conversation about making investments in those things that are going to build our economy, because we all are, more than we want to admit, rational economic actors. But we also need to start understanding that we can't have it all. We have an entitlement, a generation of Americans that has not been called to sacrifice for our common good. It is ridiculous for us to be paying taxes to pay for things that are offensive to me, and I can give you a lot from New Jersey. But we must be a nation that's willing to make investments that will pay dividends in the future and build the kind of country to make us all proud.
Of course. Yeah. Yep. And let me just on this underscoring and gas tax, amen, bring it on, price on carbon, come on, long overdue, all of this stuff we know. Look, you saw this week, $220 billion investment in China, 3 years. You brought up 3 years to build a high-speed rail between Shanghai and Beijing. They're doing a $400 billion 5-year commitment on top of the $220 billion in China alone on high-speed rail, twice as fast as the fastest train in the United States. 5 hours between Beijing and Shanghai, $85. In the United States, we appropriated $8 billion for our entire country for the high-speed rail program. In California, we've got a plan. It's $43 billion advertised, 60 plus in reality, probably 70 plus when it's done. And we've got $3 billion from the feds over the last 4 or 5 years. This is just, doesn't add up.
Right.
This is not going to work, and you're not going to compete. And this is serious. This is real. So everything Peter's talking about, it's everything Antonio's talking about, fast track. We have got to wake up to this reality. And so, you know, what you're hearing is, you know, No one likes high. Look, we have some of the highest taxes, corporate taxes, capital gains taxes, and income taxes and sales taxes in the nation, California. We have relatively low property taxes, Prop 13. That's the only competitive advantage we have from a tax perspective. It's not aiding our recovery, candidly. We're losing a lot of companies. That being said, there's other things we don't tack on the consumption side and the service side. We're a service economy. It makes no sense. We've got to substantively start having these debates, and we need to transition from the obvious, which is everyone pointing finger and having these conferences every year where we're all saying the same thing for decade after decade, to someone actually doing, and someone having the risk to put their political career on the line, back to the point of risk. Politicians are risk adverse. We did gay marriage 7.5 damn years ago, and I'm grateful Andrew Cuomo took the steps. But I didn't do that as an applause line. I'm grateful, but that was 7.5 years ago. I mean, and you know, it's less risky now. I get it. And, you know, President will finally get around to it, I guess. I hope. I mean, he can argue. I'm glad I'm not him. I can't argue separate is equal. I never want to make that argument. We brought up Brown versus Board of Education. But we have got to be willing to put our political careers on the line. Guys like me, Antonio, and Cory, we do come and go. You'll have a new panel here in a few years. Termed out. I was just termed out. He's about to be termed out.
2 years from now.
2 years from now. We come and go. And, you know, and we got to remind ourselves of that. You know, I always said I was the future ex-mayor of San Francisco. I'm the ex-mayor of San Francisco. And the future ex-lieutenant governor. But we've got to move on, and we've got to sort of disenthrall ourselves with who we are, or who we think we are, and start getting back in the business of being a conduit to the greater aspirations and ideals of the folks that entrusted us with these positions. And that, again, I think is our great challenge.
Yeah. Speaking of political courage.
On that point, every president since Eisenhower has supported raising the gas tax when it's appropriate. Right. Every president. Now you have Democrats and Republicans. And by the way, Tom Donahue, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, organization not known for supporting tax increases, supports increasing the gas tax. Why? We've got to invest in our roads and our infrastructure. That used to be a bipartisan idea, transportation. It no longer is. I mean, that's the problem here. But I want to get back to this issue that I think Cory so eloquently spoke to, this issue of sacrifice. I tell people, no matter what you think about these two wars, the one thing for sure, we haven't paid for them. We haven't shouldered the responsibility of going to war. And you mentioned this resolution on the part of the Conference of Mayors. And I led it, and I'll tell you, there were Democrats and Republicans that didn't want to touch it. They said, look, we haven't addressed the issue of the war since 1971 when we came out in opposition to Vietnam. Why would we do that? That's not in our job description. We're not U.S. senators, and we're not in the Congress. And I said to them, let me share something with you. When you look at the debate going on in America today, first of all, I said, it's not a war resolution, it's a jobs resolution, and let me explain why. You look at the debate going on, Democrats won't touch Medicare and Social Security, even though Simpson-Bowles has essentially laid out a template. Maybe you don't agree with everything in it, but essentially a template for how we address the rising cost of and unsustainability of entitlements. Republicans, on the other hand, don't want to cut defense spending, and they don't want to raise revenues, even closing tax loopholes. So I've told the mayors, what's left? Nothing. There's no money left to do anything, to put people back to work, our number one priority, and it should be theirs. There's no money to invest in infrastructure and education. Where are those cuts going to be? They're going to be in Medicaid. They're going to be in public health. Right. They're going to be in anti-gang programs. They're going to be in everything near and dear to the quality of life of our cities. And I'm very proud. This resolution was voted on almost unanimously. There were 3 mayors that voted against it. It was Republican and Democrat. We all said, hey, this course that we're taking, where we're teetering on default, is absolutely the wrong course to take. There's a middle ground. We've got to address entitlements. We've got to cut defense spending, and we've got to invest in America again. So that was a great... So you'll see me tomorrow on Face the Nation, and we're going to start putting the interests of cities, which are the engine of America's economy, back in this debate, because all you hear from is, you know, either the Republicans or Democrats, neither of whom are talking to one another, just screaming at one another, and neither of whom are coming up with the middle ground positions that we can take now to put us on a healthy, sustainable course.
Thank you very much. Now let's turn it over to the audience. Do we have any questions? Right here in the striped shirt.
So this morning's Wall Street Journal, under the fold here, plans for city pit Detroit versus donor. And this is the Kresge Foundation put $100 million into Detroit, and now there's a lot of friction. Can you talk a little bit about the positive things that have happened?
Could you just explain to me what the friction is? Just
You know, I haven't rustled the paper during your, so I don't actually know the full answer. It's on A10 if somebody's got it and wants to take a quick look. But clearly, what it looks like, just reading the beginning of it, is Kresge's put some money in without really working effectively with the Detroit mayor and city council. I'm wondering if you could just give us a couple of good examples of public-private.
Well, Cory talked about his own examples. We took over, and I don't want to talk a lot about education because tomorrow we're going to be focusing on education reform, but we put together, even though I don't have mayoral control and I wanted it and I believe in it, I think mayors need to drive the education reform movement. I have taken over, well, one, I've elected a school board that's not bought and sold by one public interest or one special interest, and two, and are supporting reform, and two, I've taken over 21 schools, about 20 schools, about 21,000 kids, the lowest performing schools in LA. I was able to get raise about $60 million from philanthropy to support our efforts to set high standards for our kids. We've done the same thing in our anti-gang programs, which, as Cory said, are probably the best practice in the country when you look at what we've been able to do over the last 6 years in reducing crime in the highest gang-infested areas. And we've done that with philanthropy as well. Look, in a time of limited resources, it's critical that, as I think Gavin said so well, that you're engaging in public-private partnerships. That we have an Office of Strategic Partnerships where we focus on philanthropy. We identify what their priorities are, what corporate priorities for giving philanthropy are, and what ours are, and we try to mesh them together, pooling all of our money and our resources around best practices. So I don't know what the content of that article is all about, but if Detroit doesn't want it, LA will take it. Trust me.
I think Cory can speak.
Now, there may be reasons for not wanting it. I have a lot of respect for Mayor Bing, by the way, and I'm not, so I want to be clear about that. But, we know how important it is to have those philanthropic relationships.
So I just want to understand that there is an understandable amount of deep suspicion within minority communities that have for decades and decades seen the worst aspects of this nation, have seen exploitation up close and personal, when you leave, I talk to people in my community all the time. Oh, I go to the Short Hills Mall and I get followed around, or so there is real racial tensions that are in communities, and forgive communities, but often when people show up and say, "I'm riding on a white horse with $100 million and I'm here to save you," the reaction is not always going to be people standing up and applauding and saying, "Please come in." So just that's just an important, understandable sentiment to understand. And so we've come into friction as well. I got a lot of pushback for the $100 million I raised from Mark Zuckerberg to be matched by other folks. And a lot of it was hitting a lot of just ingrained suspicions, dealing with a lot of demagoguery, which a lot of elites within urban communities will use to support their political position perspective. And so what we just made is a very patent commitment to complete transparency and to make sure that we weren't making decisions in a vacuum, that we were going to be inclusive. We spent a lot of money actually holding dozens and dozens and dozens of community forums just to discuss and give people a sense of full investment in the ideas that we would be using with those resources. So I don't know what the Kresge Foundation has done, but I think Gavin has said it, that creating partnerships with local leaders is critical, and then creating an environment that is completely transparent. And these days and age, and my team, we're about to go even further out on Quora, on Foursquare, on Twitter, Facebook, to make sure that there are mechanisms by which everybody can not only feel that they can see what's going on, but as my Facebook posts, if you read them, that they can also be a part of a larger community conversation. And the thing I found at the end of the day is that I don't care if you're somebody who's affluent white family from the suburbs of Detroit, whether you're an inner city African-American family from within Detroit, remarkably, when the conversations start going, everybody wants the same thing. And they realize at the end of the day, we may create these invisible lines that separate cities from suburbs, but ultimately that we are caught inescapably in this with the same destiny and interdependency.
And let me just very, very briefly, because I know there's a lot of questions. It's not just about public-private partnerships, it's about public-public partnerships. We do a very inadequate job of leveraging city, county, state, and federal resources. And collaboration is the key. The issue, though, on the public-private, as Cory said, is absolute transparency. And to the question, just briefly, one of the things I'm very excited about, and I just have to share it, we just did something, I'm not sure it's happening many places or anywhere. Every child that entered kindergarten this year just received a college savings account. We actually set up a separate account, and this was driven by philanthropy. We put up a modest amount of money, barely anything, and we have now received 3-to-1 matches from the private sector to create these college savings accounts. And this, by the way, half African Americans, half of Latinos in our state don't have access to a checking or a bank. They go to check cashing locations or payday lenders. There's more of them than McDonald's and Starbucks combined in this country. Just think about that and think about the impact of that in terms of forcing people into this cycle of poverty. And here we are, these kids, parents that don't even have bank accounts, have their own online account with their name attached to it, with now an expectation, to Peter's point, once a mind is stretched, it never goes back to its original form, an expectation that they can use their money when they go to college, not if they have that opportunity.
So the woman in the purple.
Ordinary.
By the way, they came out of the conference of mayors, that whole college savings account. Oh, yeah, no, that's right. I forgot, that's right. And it was a bipartisan idea. Yeah.
And you get that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, can you bring back the old vocational schools? Because many of these kids who went through this, 8th grade 3 times are going to drop out and can't even get into the Army anymore. So we know that in the old days, vocational schools gave them a trade and kept them off the street. The other thing is there a way to have like a VISTA program or a GI program for kids where, if they volunteer, they can go to school or help pay for school? And the third thing is there something where you have a volunteer office where people can volunteer when they're elderly or when they want to bring acting to schools, where they won't be sued, or they have dog training for prisoners, so where there's not such a legitimate, litigious situation that will hurt your programs.
Yeah. Let me speak to that for a second. First of all, in LA today, we didn't before, we had a lot of tracking of kids. And in fact, in my own experience as a kid, I was tracked. I was in Catholic school and college prep when I got kicked out of Catholic school. I went to public school and they put me in a basic reading class and classes, shop classes that weren't really what my mother and I were looking for. So in LA, we have a thing called an A through G college-ready curriculum. We believe that every kid needs to have a curriculum that is rigorous and that prepares them for college. Now, at the same time, we're also focusing on getting kids, not everybody's going to college. We're also focusing on developing the skills to be workforce ready. And that's, I think, what you're speaking to. That's important too. But one of the things we tell people as an example, and we always get, can you give me a job? I mean, that's the one thing when you're a mayor, someone will walk up to you and say, hey, can you get me a job? And so when you try to help one of these kids with a job, and you get a call back from the apprentice unit of the union that you sent them to, or because they're the ones that do all the apprenticeship programs, they'll come back and say, well, you know, they never took algebra, they never took geometry, they can't be a carpenter. In the old days, you could be a carpenter, an electrician, all of those. You can't do that now without that kind of training. So yes, we do have to prepare kids to be workforce ready, and we are now in LA, and I know around the country, focusing a lot more on the kids that aren't going to college, but we're also trying to give them a rigorous education, because almost every job requires a basic level of education that comes with a college-ready, rigorous curriculum.
I just want to add, because this is the crowd that I think really needs to feel the sense of bold optimism. There are tremendous innovations going on in America outside of government to fit the populations you're talking about, fueled by folks. And I'll give you a couple examples. Youth Build is a program, one of Clinton's People of Hope. They actually take kids who are at risk or who have dropped out. We're expanding them rapidly in Newark, gives them construction training. They're literally building a homeless shelter in Newark right now, and the kids are learning skills, trades, getting their high school GED going on. Year Up, some of you have heard of, where kids who are at risk of dropping out get intensive computer technical training and get a chance to connect to high-paying jobs as well. Again, funded by philanthropy. It's where venture philanthropists, like many in this room, connect with social entrepreneurs and create a strong partnership, and then government leaders like myself dote on them and say, please help us do this. So all of these things and programs are amazing. And you know, we mentioned John Fisher, but really this amazing man that is his father, who's, in my opinion, one of the great Americans. He didn't think of this idea called KIPP schools. He found one small pilot program going on someplace and said, you know what, I just want to help you build that to scale. I'm a business person. I built Gap in America. I want to help you do what's necessary, so not 150 kids in Texas and Brooklyn are getting this program, but we're going to try to see if we can expand it nationwide. Wes Moore is in the back, and I point him out not only because he's the only other bald black man in the room, and I want people to make sure that we're not the same person. But he's far better looking than I am and far smarter than I am. I got a Rhodes Scholarship because I was a jock. He got a Rhodes Scholarship because he's a genius. But he wrote a great book called The Other Wes Moore. And I was watching the video, the Aspen Institute speech he gave this morning to get myself motivated, because it's a powerful speech, and where he just basically lays out the difference between a Rhodes Scholar and a guy that goes to prison is so small in terms of what it would take to turn a life around. That's what KIPP schools are doing every single day. And the difference makers, who are they going to be? And all of us have the power to create that difference. And one of the things he points out in his speech was what happens to young kids during the summer, how much they lose in academics. Well, where are those geniuses in this room that are going to find those, like we do, the venture capitalists do, find those people who are creating the best summer programs and expand it. And then what my job is to start making the policy case that we should be directing public money to fund something like that, as opposed to the programs that we do fund that just rolls out a basketball that makes more strategic investments. When that happens, America changes.
And just briefly, again, you know, it's absolutely true. There are extraordinary things happening in almost every community of our country. It's all about scale. It's the notion they're not evenly distributed. And that, again, should be a point of optimism. Second point, our seniors. It was such a great question. Yes. We talk about our youth, but my gosh, you've got 7% of the population 65 or older as we speak today. It's about to be 20% by 2050. And so that experience, that remarkable wealth of knowledge and engaging them. We have a small program we started called Experience Corps, where seniors are coming in and mentoring our high school students and middle school students. It's all about scale. And this is one of the great opportunities to unleash that remarkable wisdom and the collective talent of our seniors, and that cannot be lost in this discussion.
One more question, Shelley.
As leaders who represent over 70% of the population of our country and over 80%, I think you said, of GDP, which is a number I'd not heard before.
90 and 84.
90 and 84, even more so. Can you as leaders not help us as voters do more to move the national agenda beyond just asking for the end of the wars and the reinvestment into the U.S. infrastructure? Can we not collectively do something more than that? It seems to me that you're the new president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Congratulations. It seems like that ought to be a powerful organization in helping us, because somehow voters are not getting the word up there. The other day, Tom Friedman said it's time for a third party. He's ready for it. I think a lot of us are ready for it, because the two parties we've got aren't getting the job done. Can we have a party of mayors leading the rest of the country to get the job done?
Let me say something about that, because I know there's some media here. I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something, and we all have this. I mean, look, these two guys, they're two of the best. And you don't see them on Meet the Press, on Face the Nation, on the cable channels as much as you do the folks in the Beltway. I'm amazed at how Congress members who represent, a small, 700,000 people or whatever, and don't actually have any executive authority, how many of them speak and really are the voice of the nation. And the same with the U.S. Senate. When people ask me about the U.S. Senate, I said, well, Jesus, I got a big job. I'm the mayor of the second largest city in the country. And what happens is our voice really isn't brought into the debate in the way that you see the Beltway. When you look at the talking heads, they're almost all from Washington, and they're almost all elected officials in the House and the Senate. With all due respect, Jane Harman is one of the best. I saw her walk in. I love her dearly. But when I look at that and I'm saying, wow, I mean, these people are, what, as I said last week, or the week before on Meet the Press, what planet are they on? I mean, when you see how close we're getting to default right now. August 2nd is the deadline, July 22nd. We better have a deal, because you're going to have to put all of that into writing and into legislation. So we are trying, I think, through our best practices most of you, someone was introduced to me yesterday by my friend Mark, and they said, this is the mayor. And they said, the mayor of what? And of Aspen? No. Well, but you can't blame them. We're sitting here, I represent a metropolitan area of 18 million people, and, you'd never know it. And so to them, I would say, including other voices around the country is really important, particularly when 94%, that was the number, of the new jobs that are going to be created in the country are going to be created in our cities. Michael Porter said 2 days ago when we were at the Clinton Global Initiative, he says, you don't invest in America, you invest in America's cities and regions. I mean, that's how you do it. So in our ports, in our airports. So your point is a good one. We want to be heard, but oftentimes, people don't really call on us on a national level. Your taxi, green taxi, you did it 6 years ago, but like you said, you did it on cable TV. Nobody was listening until when you, well, $16 billion, they're going to listen a little better.
I know you're trying to end, but I just want to say one give another bald man a chance.
Yes.
Give me special treatment here.
I will.
Look, at the end of the day, honestly, I'm here with two leaders who have helped me and helped. Because of their leadership and their example, they've changed Newark more than they probably know. But we are not the solution to this problem. And it's going to be great, and I pray that all three of our careers continue in public life and public service, but we will not be the solution. No great revolutions in America have ever happened from the top. And so I've come out to Aspen many years. It's like I always say, I'm going unto the mountaintop. But when King went to the mountaintop, he did what we're doing. He visualized. He saw the promised land. But he then descended from the mountain and rolled up his sleeves and got to work. As Frederick Douglass once said, I prayed for years for my freedom, and I was still a slave. It wasn't until I started praying with my hands and my feet that I found my freedom. We must work like we've never worked before to create the democracy. If we want a third party, Those third parties are going to start because they have they're calling the first caucus in Los Angeles for next month. Everybody come. They're calling the first caucus in New York City to talk about what we stand for, what we believe in. They're picking issues that they care about. This is really what our country needs. As Stokely Carmichael said, we are the leaders that we've been looking for. And I hope that when we leave this mountaintop, we can get back to work to change America in a positive way.
That's a wonderful way to end. Thank you all.